Welcome, everybody. My name is LeahRose, and I'm here with Veronicah. No last name because she's that badass. Veronicah with an H. You can find out all about her and her work at veronicah.com. Veronicah with an H. Thank you for being here, Veronicah.
Thanks for having me, LeahRose.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is going to be a super juicy conversation because both of us, this is one of my best friends, first of all. And we both are powerful, badass women. And we want to have a conversation with the women out there today who struggle with things like feeling small in the face of other powerful women, of, you know, comparison and competition, and really the kind of things that women do to each other to make us, not even make us feel and act small, that have us act in sabotaging ways against ourselves. And so on UnZipped here, we're kind of going to bring you some juicy tidbits from our own lives and from things that we see. We both teach in the Women's Circle community about how you can reframe and shift out of comparison and into just owning your power in a magnificent way, because we all need you. We need you in the world. So welcome, Veronicah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic. I think it's at the root of a lot of pain in women's lives, and
Absolutely.
It's really just not necessary.
Yeah.
It's optional.
It is optional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you see women do? Like, a lot of this happens in relationship to each other, right? So two women are in relationship to each other, or you have a woman in a women's circle, or you have a woman, in some sort of group dynamic where we see kind of the dark side or the shadow of the sisterhood come up. What are some of the things that you see?
The things that I've noticed over the years, I've been in Women's Circle for about almost more than 17 years now, consistently. And although like the circle, the symbol of the circle is supposed to be about a non-hierarchical condition, but as women who've grown up in a society that is hierarchical, we've learned as a survival technique to evaluate who's top dog,
Right.
who's the teacher, who's the authority, who do I need to listen to? And we're really taught to evaluate, first on what we see.
Right.
So, she's thinner than me, she's taller, she's fatter, her clothes, don't look quite like mine. We're very, we just have that superficial, like immediate bias that we're not even conscious of always.
Right.
We make a lot of assumptions about people. And I think that in women's circles, I see that a lot of times the circle has been organized and facilitated by somebody who's owning their power.
Right.
Who has high self-care, because that's the type of teachings that they're trying to pass on to the women, or to encourage in the women that they're inviting to the circle. And sometimes that can, women use the word like intimidating. That
Right.
woman's intimidating. What does intimidating mean? Well, it's something in them is sparking fear. You're afraid.
Right. Right.
You're afraid of that person a little bit. And
Right.
Some people find that exciting, and they're more gung-ho for the circle. Other people, they're like trying to figure out if it's a safe space for them or not.
Right.
I find in circles where the facilitators are more vulnerable, that there's less of that, because it's harder to put them on a pedestal when they're just as human as you. And sometimes that's really disturbing for people, because they want the pedestal.
They want the pedestal. Well, let me just tell you, how many times I have heard, when I first met you, I was intimidated by you. And like, I'm the leader of the Pussy Wisdom Academy. Like, I'm sitting in this circle, and all, like, either, like you said, it's either intimidating because, you know, they're beautiful, they're doing something that you want to do, they're living life in a way that you're not living, and so it's like this reflection of like everything that they're not doing and who they're not. And or a leader being vulnerable is like, oh no, like, you can't be human, you have to have all the answers because I don't.
Right.
And that's actually the scariest kind of woman to be with and to teach and to lead.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of, that's the old way is to find an icon, focus on them,
Right.
and make them a movement. You know, people have done it with Bernie Sanders. They've done it with all, you know, political people, you know, lifestyle gurus, whatever you want to look at. They're like, okay, they have the way. And when it comes to Women's Circle, it's like, there is no way.
Right.
There's no one way to be a woman.
Right.
There's no one way. Like, there's so many different kinds of women, and that's why I love a Women's Circle that has diversity, that has a diversity, especially of age. I think that intergenerational is really important. I feel like the more diversity it is, the harder it is to make comparisons, because everyone is so diverse that it's harder to stack each other up against each other.
Yeah.
But the big thing I definitely see with the pedestal thing is, oh, you know, she has everything together, I'm never going to be at her level. And it's a way women self-sabotage to shut themselves down from growth, from, you know, aspiring, because they kind of see, oh, she's up here and I'm down here. But the reality is no one's up here. No one's up here. Everyone's at a different point in the similar spiritual journey.
Totally.
And yeah, that's the saddest part for me, is when people shut down and when they're confronted.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is because we're conditioned with that comparison, with that evaluation of other people. We're conditioned to judge. As a survival technique. It's something that's been cultivated by patriarchy to keep women from working together. It's definitely something that's so pervasive that even like with myself, that I've worked on it actively trying to celebrate other women as much as possible. To, you know, like, yeah, bitch, good job.
Right.
You know, like, I make that a practice in my life, and we make it a practice in Pussy Wisdom Academy. We do celebrations. We actually call it a brag, which I think is a great word for it, because it's such a trigger word for people. Like, oh, you're bragging, you know? It's like, hell yeah, I'm bragging.
Right. I like to say, you know, she's not your competition, she's proof that it can be done.
Yes.
And every time that I lead, I'm thinking about that. And yeah, I think it's like, for any of you listening who are listening right now and you're seeing something about yourself, like maybe you're in a situation right now where you're comparing yourself to, let's say, your coach or your leader, or like someone that's not you, that is of the same gender as you, and then making yourself, what happens? What do you do? Like, do you withdraw? Do you get really small? Do you start to pull away? Like, what are some things that women do when they're faced with this comparison?
I mean, the thing I see is gossiping. You try to start to tear someone down so that you don't, that you can feel better about yourself in comparison to them.
Right.
you avoid, you know,
Avoid
you
is a big
leave the
one.
circle. Oh, that
Yeah.
they're too wild and strong and beautiful
Right.
for me. I
Right.
don't fit in. You start to make the story about how you don't fit in, that you don't
Right.
belong.
Yep.
And they're literally like, this is a circle for everyone. You know, this
Right.
is an inclusive circle. And you're like, oh, I don't belong here.
Right.
And that's strictly based on comparison. It has nothing to do with the inherent of who you are.
Right.
Um, and so I see a lot of lost opportunities for connection and for trust.
Yeah.
I think trust is a big piece of it. And I myself have thrown myself in like all kinds of situations to that aggravate comparison.
Yeah.
So I'm a polyamorous woman. So, you know, I have
Right.
partners who have other partners. And that's like comparing like, oh, what time they get and I don't get. And I fall into that and I have to catch myself, you know, because it's like that's a totally different relationship than my relationship. Why am I even thinking about that? That has nothing to do with me. And also being in relationship, like romantic relationships with other women. A strong example I have where I tend to be the one being compared to is because I have a strong sexual drive. I have a strong connection to orgasm. And a lot of that's intimidating for a lot of
Right.
women because they don't feel like they have access to that. They're not as connected to their bodies. That's what they start thinking
Right.
because they see me and they see how I am. And then they're kind of like, okay, well, you're like a different animal than me almost. Like
Right.
we're not even remotely the same. And again, like who fucking cares? Like as long as you're enjoying yourself and I'm enjoying myself, then what, like we don't need to make a count, you know,
Right.
accounts of climaxes. Like, no, I'm not counting. I never count
Right.
because it's not useful. All it does is keep us separate from each other. And it's not there's not a you're not present when you're comparing. You
Right.
know, you're making a laundry list. You're working in that analytical part of our brain that's not helpful.
Right. So what's something like I can imagine being the receiver of that comparison. What's something from your own personal life that you've maybe see yourself doing as a real life example?
When I'm comparing myself to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's been coming up a lot lately in terms of me as a dancer, because I've been a dancer my whole life. I do belly dance and movement, and I when I hear somebody say someone's a real dancer, like usually they mean professional dancer is what
Yeah.
they mean. But I automatically go, well, aren't I a dancer? I'm a
Right.
dancer. You know what I mean? Why does she get to be a real dancer just because she has beautiful costumes and she's thin? But that's not what they mean. That's all me projecting my insecurities on being who I am as a dancer. That's come up a few times, and I have to be like, Veronicah, like, is that a helpful thing to even be thinking about? Does that make you dance more? No.
Right.
Does that make you enjoy your body more to be thinking about whether you're a real dancer or not? Absolutely not.
Right.
So that's one example. It still comes up, you know, it definitely especially because I feel like there's this idea that women have to define and their value and define themselves through what others think of them and by comparing
Right.
themselves to others.
And it's just
And
something we do. It's like so inherent. Can I share
yeah,
something from
absolutely.
where that recently came up?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in Pussy Wisdom Academy, we have women sharing. And the whole point of Pussy Wisdom Academy is offering weekly support for women leaders. And there was a couple times recently where women have been sharing about, you know, them working with coaches and them like hiring other people. And I'm like, but wait a minute. it's like there's a part of me that's like, but that's what I do. Like, why aren't they working with me? And then and then this is the dangerous part, is like, oh, well, I must not be doing a good job. They must not like me. Like that kind of shit. It's mostly like, I'm not doing a good job and they must not like me. And it's so, first of all, it just takes me out of my power, like immediately. And people are allowed to work with whoever the hell they want to work with, and it absolutely means nothing about me. But there was a little part of me that was like, oh, like, what am I doing wrong? And then I just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and then I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore,
Yeah. Well, and every time you do that, when you collapse, it takes so much effort to blossom again.
Right.
And so you're taking like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 step forward, 1 step back. And so how much, of your life force, is being kind of wasted on comparison.
Oh, totally. 100%.
Yeah. And I think as girls, when we're little, we're trained that we need to be all things to all people.
Right.
That you need to be a good girl.
Right.
And listen and do what you're told and make people feel good.
Right.
And that's our job. And it's like people, talk about, they talk about codependency like it's this thing that only certain people have. But it's really something that's societally trained into us.
Oh, yeah.
I think most women I know are some level of codependent, and most people, but women specifically, are trained. That's how you're a good wife, a good daughter, is that you sacrifice yourself for others. And I think comparison has a lot to do with that.
Right. Absolutely. It's like, for my example, I'm just coming from ego. Like, it's my ego that needs to like feel good and look good and be everything for everybody. That codependence. I definitely know I'm a codependent. But like, it took me a minute to even see what I was doing, because I was just collapsing the feeling. It was like this feeling of dread. And when I trace it, it's all about like not getting invited to the birthday party when I was 9 years old.
Right.
And like that feeling of being left out, or that time when I was, in 3rd grade and I didn't get into the GATE program, the gifted and talented program.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. And all of my friends, there was only 3, but the 3 of my friends all got in and I didn't. And immediately I was left out. So what tools do you have for someone who is experiencing this right now?
I think number one with anything that's shadow work is speaking it aloud to at least one person.
Yeah.
Even if you're not ready to share maybe in your circle how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Finding at least one person that understands the context that you can just say, and using inquiry. I mean, just basics, getting into inquiry and like, why, how am I feeling? What's the belief behind the feeling? How is that true? How could I possibly know it's true? Some of the kind of basic inquiry work, just starting there, to bring awareness. Because like you said, I didn't even know what I was doing and I was totally, imploding because of comparison.
Yeah.
So starting there, starting with, saying, I really am jealous of so-and-so. And just saying it out loud and admitting it is always, the first, it removes some of the power from the feelings.
Right.
It breaks the dam, it breaks the dam to allow, just the awareness of it. And I have some relationships that I'm probably never going to not be comparing. But that doesn't mean that I have to let that comparison and those thoughts affect my peace of mind and my relationship with that person.
Right.
That's where my choice, that's where my choice is how I allow those thoughts, feelings, sensations to affect my behavior. So I think that's really important. I think working on, those, like you were bringing up, like the childhood memories, and doing healing around that, and loving your inner child, because it's a lot of times it's our inner little girl who's like, oh, I'm not good enough,
Right.
And she needs nurturing. It's not like I'm saying like just ignore her. It's like, no, it's like, being able to mother yourself in that way, because many of us, our mothers were our example of how to relate to other women, including our relationship with our mothers. And so if you didn't necessarily have the most evolved version of, and I mean, who does, right? Every mother has they're humans too. Exactly. They're not on a pedestal. They're very human and dealing with a lot of lessons as a mother. Taking an inventory of what were these experiences that I remember chipping away at my self-esteem.
Right.
Because most of us at 3, we're like doing cartwheels and we're like showing our underwear, and like we are not self-conscious. So at some point, certain things happened that told us we were wrong, and we needed to compare ourselves to others to figure out what was right. So I think that's really important, is just creating like a lineage of comparison. And then also thinking about the times when you celebrated others, and the times that you looked at people as an example of where you could go. And I have those people in my life that I'm so grateful for, and grateful to myself that I was able to see them as an example.
Yeah.
Of how I could change. I mean, I feel like even when we met in a circle with a teacher that we were both very close to, but we didn't know each other. And I remember comparing myself with you, and we sat on either side, and I'm like, who's that? Who's that? I don't know her. But we eventually, were able to find that a level of trust and kind of melt those barriers that I felt between that kind of, you know what I mean? A little bit of competition over who's the best student. I get into that shit sometimes,
No, seriously, if I'm just going to admit something, I still compare myself to you, Veronicah, because Veronicah is amazing at what she does. She's a great teacher. She's been doing, like, she's been a witch since she was like 14 from her aunties, and like she was in women's circles longer than me, and like it's like, being a leader, being someone like me, I'm with people. Like I'm reliable to cut through the bullshit, but that doesn't mean that stuff doesn't happen. And you've come and taught in Pussy Wisdom Academy, and then the feedback, it's like, oh my God, I love that. That's so turned on. And it's like, oh, I could go into comparison with that. I could go into, oh, well, why aren't they saying that about me? But like, it's unhelpful. It just doesn't actually help me move forward. Right. And like, so celebrating her actually kills, and naming it too, like naming it, like you were saying, and then taking inventory. Like, I know that I do this stuff because I've worked with women and been in these spaces for so long. And then also celebrating, right? Like, yes, the women loved her. That's hot. I'm going to have her back, right? Like, that just means that we're cultivating sisterhood in the circle. And I want I want women to celebrate each other. So anyway, that's just a little Little
Yeah.
thing, little truth telling.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're hitting on a really important key, which is when we have people that we admire, that we respect what they do, and we have that, comparison's going to come up, but there's strengths you have that I don't have.
Right,
And that's why we have community. So then the community as a whole can be successful
right,
because we are complementing each other in what our strengths are.
right. It's almost
Yeah.
like getting out of me, myself, and I land. Like if I was
Yes.
just playing my own little game, like I would just want all of the ladies for myself and I want to be their everything. But then when I make it about community, like of course it would include others, like 100%, because there's so much brilliance in community. There's so many brilliant women that we are connected to, that, and if you're listening, that you are connected to right now. And why not learn from them? Like they can contribute to your life. Let them,
Yeah.
and feel the
Absolutely.
burn.
Yeah, because those pain points that come up for us, it's just information. You don't have to
Right,
make it mean anything about the core of who you are.
right.
It's information. And I found myself, I knew that I was doing better about comparison when I started going to the beach in the summer and being like, all of these women are beautiful and really feeling it, being
Yeah,
like, I don't
exactly.
know about the men, but all the women were beautiful. All, like just like every shape and size, just had their grace.
Yeah.
And I love Pussy Wisdom Academy because we do brags, celebrations.
Mhm,
We can say I brag, and you
mhm.
take that word brag that it kind of people use to shame others for believing
Right,
in themselves and and sharing what's exciting in their life. It's a way to put
right,
people down, say you're bragging.
right.
But we put in Pussy Wisdom Academy, and I love, the other thing is there's no, like, the celebration doesn't vary depending on how big the brag is.
Right.
Sometimes the brag is I got up and took a shower today when I
Yeah.
really didn't want to, and I showed up for Circle, and we celebrate that almost more sometimes.
Right.
There's an egalitarianism to our celebration of people, because sometimes just showing up was a huge step for you, and
Right.
that should be celebrated just as much as the person who just started making six figures.
Totally. And it's not about one upping each other. It's about
No.
being able to celebrate each other. And just as an aside, bragging came from Mama Gina. So you could find Mama Gina. She talks a lot about bragging. That's where I learned it from. And I learned it from her students who use it in their programs, like Julia Wells. I'm just going to name her, Christina
Yeah.
Marassi. And then here it is in Pussy Wisdom Academy because it works.
Yeah. See, that's a funny thing about Mama Gina that you bring her up, because I've had many people compare me to Mama Gina, and I've thus
Ah.
avoided her work.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And it's like no real reason why, but I kind of feel like, well, if I'm like her, then I don't have to go there. But at the same time, it also has made me to, like, I probably could have explored that, but since people compare me to her, I'm like, eh. So thanks for the
Yeah.
reminder that I
Uh-huh.
should probably let go of that shit and just see what kind of juice is in there, because it's probably really great.
Right. And that's
Um,
taking it back to the inquiry that you were talking about. Like, I'm feeling charged around this. What's going on? Or I'm feeling really small about this. What's going on? All right. So let's just wrap this conversation up because we could
okay,
go on all day about this.
I know.
We talked about some tools. We talked about, saying it out loud, discovering like the lineage, like what happened, being in the
Right,
inquiry,
right.
celebrating.
Celebrating.
Um,
And even if you have to fake it till you make it with the celebrating,
right.
like, oh, I'm so happy
Totally.
for you. Just do it
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, I feel really jealous when you're talking about your win. Like, that's okay too. That's actually where we need to get to. It's like, tell the truth about this stuff, be vulnerable. right? And I think that's the final tool, is to be vulnerable about this.
Yeah.
We've been programmed to be this way. This is a function of our patriarchy, of our society that we live in, to one up each other, to like be better than, to
Right.
have the hotter boyfriend, have the or girlfriend, to be the best at school, to, it's like be the prettiest. And part of the work that I believe women need to be doing right now is in like breaking all that shit down. Like it has to go. If we want to pave the way, if we want women to, rule the world, we got to get right with each other first and get right within ourselves so that we can play a big game.
Yeah. I mean, shame comparison, like comparison
Right.
shame. Because the women who know they shouldn't be comparing then get ashamed if they do.
Right.
But like you're saying, it's like, just be honest about it. And then it takes it down by a half once you speak it aloud.
100%. And the thing about shame is that it only has power when it lives in the secret.
Yeah.
Once
Absolutely.
it is said out loud, it has no power anymore. It actually becomes your power. All right, so let's wrap it up. What would you like to leave these listeners with today, Veronicah?
I would like to say that you are not broken, that you are incredibly beautiful exactly as you are today. Comparing yourself to anyone else is not going to get you what you want in this life. So just give it up. Just give it up. Let it go. As much, and just keep letting it go.
Yeah.
Because I want your gift in this world. I want your beauty. I want your bigness. I want it. I want to chew on it and savor it. And so please don't deny us your gifts, your beauty. That's just tragic.
Yes, to all of that. Thank you so much, Veronicah.